Inside the grand ballroom of the Grand Pinnacle Hotel in Manhattan, the heavy gold-leafed double doors swung open inward. I wore a sweeping, liquid black swan feather gown. My left hand was linked through the arm of my notoriously reclusive father, Victor Vance, a shadow billionaire and head of the nation's most formidable private military contractor. My right hand rested lightly on the arm of my mother, Eleanor Vance, the powerful governor of New York. Under the blinding brilliance of the crystal chandeliers, I looked down at the man collapsed on the floor, losing control of his bodily functions in sheer terror. My husband, Julian Crawford. I leaned in slightly, my red lips hovering just inches from his trembling ear. My voice was as light as a feather, yet carried the chill of hell itself. Tell me, CEO Crawford, do you still have the guts to want my kidney? The moment my consciousness returned, it was greeted by the harsh, biting stench of antiseptic and the cold, metallic clinking of surgical instruments. I was strapped tightly to a freezing operating table by rough leather restraints. The massive surgical light directly above me cast a blinding, sickly white glare, making my eyes ache and illuminating the absolute despair of my current reality. Charlotte, you're awake. A voice so gentle it could drown someone in its sweetness echoed near my ear. I forced my heavy eyes to turn and saw Julian. He was dressed in green, sterile surgical scrubs, revealing only his deep, striking eyes. Those were the same eyes that had been my safe haven for 3 years of marriage. But right now, they resembled 2 bottomless frozen pools. There was no love in them, only a cold, ruthless calculation. He reached out, his latex-gloved hand gently stroking my cheek. The gesture was tender, as if we were not in a sterile, sinister underground clinic, but in our moonlit bedroom in Tribeca. Don't be afraid, Charlie. It's just a minor procedure, he whispered softly. I know how kind-hearted you are. You couldn't bear to watch Chloe just die like this, right? Chloe Sterling, his first love, the one that got away, and the woman who supposedly needed my kidney to survive. My throat felt like it was on fire. Every word I pushed out felt like sandpaper against my vocal cords. Julian, you can't! Shh. He pressed a gloved finger to my lips, cutting off my futile plea. I know it's unfair to you, but think about it. You only need 1 kidney to live a perfectly normal life. But Chloe, without this kidney, she'll die. I can't live without her. I can't live without her. Those 6 words were like red-hot branding irons, searing violently into my chest, burning the heart that had beaten solely for him for 3 years into a charred, bloody, lifeless husk. He took a document and an ink pad from a nurse standing nearby and carefully brought them to my face. It was an organ donation consent form. Be a good girl, Charlie. Sign this and press your thumbprint. Once Chloe recovers, I'll compensate you tenfold. I swear, I'll treat you like a queen for the rest of your life. His voice was laced with seduction, treating me like a naive, ignorant child. I looked at him. I looked at the reflection of myself in his eyes, pale, hair disheveled, looking like a sacrificial lamb waiting for the slaughter. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of sacrifice. I had washed his clothes, cooked his meals, and abandoned the protection of my ultra-powerful family. I hid my identity, pretending to be an orphaned, penniless girl from the Rust Belt, just to stay by his side as he climbed from a broke startup founder to the CEO of Apex Technologies, a tech unicorn about to go public with a multi-billion-dollar IPO. I thought I had married for love. Until 3 days ago, when Chloe Sterling showed up at our penthouse with a terminal kidney failure diagnosis, crying and begging me to save her life. And my husband, Julian, just held the shivering Chloe, looking at me with absolute entitlement. Charlie, your blood type is a perfect match. It's destiny. Give her your kidney. When I refused, he confiscated my ID, passport, and phone, locking me in our home. And today, he had me kidnapped and strapped to a table in a black market clinic funded by his company. My heart turned to ice, inch by inch, until the last trace of warmth completely vanished. Julian. I closed my eyes as a single tear slid down my temple. My voice was hoarse, What if I say no? His patience finally snapped. He stood up straight, withdrawing his hand. The disguise of gentleness peeled away instantly, leaving nothing but impatience and cruelty. Charlotte, I am not discussing this with you. I am informing you. You are donating that kidney today, whether you want to or not. He didn't look at me again, turning to the anesthesiologist with a cold command. Prep the anesthesia. Up the dosage. The moment the needle pierced my skin, I shuddered. The icy liquid surged through my veins, flooding my limbs. My consciousness began to slip away rapidly. My body felt heavy, as if I were plunging into a bottomless abyss. Just a second before I completely lost consciousness, the operating room doors swung open. Through my blurring vision, I saw a slender figure in a designer hospital gown walk in. Even the baggy gown couldn't hide her frail, pitifully beautiful face. It was Chloe Sterling. Shouldn't she be lying in an ICU, fighting for her life while waiting for my organ? Why was she walking around? Julian. Honey. Her voice was dripping with a sickeningly sweet, impatient excitement. Is she under yet? I'm getting a little impatient. Julian walked over and naturally wrapped his arm around her waist, his tone entirely doting. Almost. Look at how rosy your cheeks are. You don't look sick at all. Chloe lifted her chin smugly, casting a sidelong glance at me. The contempt and victorious arrogance in her eyes felt like a toxic thorn driving into my numbing nerves. Of course I don't. Because I'm not sick at all. She let out a crisp, tinkling laugh, but the words she spoke were pure venom. You did a great job paying off the doctor for that fake diagnosis. If we didn't play it that way, how could we ever get this idiot to willingly cough up her kidney? My body convulsed violently. The heavy fog of the anesthesia was instantly ripped apart by a lightning bolt of sheer horror. Not sick? The diagnosis was faked? You're a genius, Julian. Chloe wrapped herself around him like a viper, lowering her voice, but I could still hear every word in the quiet room. Once we take her kidney, make sure she doesn't wake up. Just stage a medical accident, anesthesia, allergy, severe hemorrhage, whatever. Then, that massive life insurance policy you made her sign last week will finally pay out. You're the sole beneficiary. With that cash injection, Apex Tech won't have any funding gaps before the IPO. My blood literally froze. He didn't just want my kidney. He wanted my life. And the insurance money over my dead body. I snapped my eyes open, glaring at Julian, desperately searching his face for even a flicker of shock or denial. Nothing. He just patted Chloe's back, his tone as casual as discussing the weather. I know. I'll tell the surgeon to make it look clean. You step outside first. It's going to get bloody in here, and I don't want you to be scared. Make it look clean. Those 5 dismissive words hit me like a sledgehammer, shattering the very last illusion of love I harbored in my soul. The man who had stayed up all night caring for me when I had the flu, the man who had driven across Manhattan just to buy my favorite cheesecake for my birthday, the man who swore to love me until his dying breath, was coldly plotting to harvest my organs, murder me, and use my corpse to fund his future with another woman. Following the excruciating grief came an apocalyptic wave of hatred. The hatred surged through my freezing veins like molten lava, evaporating my last tear and burning away the meek, innocent facade I had maintained for 3 years. To hell with love. To hell with holding back. I, Charlotte Vance, am no lamb waiting for the slaughter. Just as the anesthesia was about to completely swallow my mind, I summoned the very last ounce of strength in my body. I pressed my tongue hard against my upper left molar. Embedded there was a custom microsensor crown. Following the protocol my father had established years ago, I pressed it 3 times with a specific rhythm and pressure, triggering a maximum level SOS signal. Codename: Operation Red Eclipse. Once this signal was triggered, it meant the heiress of the Vance family was facing a lethal, level 1 threat. Within 30 minutes, the absolute elite tactical unit of the Vance security empire, no matter where I was in the world, would descend like a thunderbolt to eradicate every threat around me. I had never used it in 3 years. I naively thought I would never need to. Julian Crawford. Chloe Sterling. You thought this was a rigged hunt where you held all the cards. You were wrong. You just woke up a leviathan that had been sleeping for far too long. You can begin! Julian's voice was the last thing I heard before the darkness took me. Go ahead, I thought. Let the countdown to your doomsday begin. The operating room was deathly quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of the EKG monitor. The gleaming tip of the scalpel touched my skin, sending a sharp prick of pain. The surgeon's hands were steady. He was clearly a veteran of these black market butcheries. Julian had already left. He was heading to the Waldorf Astoria for the most important night of his life, his pre-IPO gala, an extravagant banquet meant to celebrate his impending billionaire status. The entire New York elite would be there. He planned to officially introduce Chloe to high society tonight. He thought he had left me here to die, setting the stage for his perfect ascent. He had no idea the bells of hell were already tolling for him. Boom! A deafening explosion echoed like a thunderclap, violently shaking the entire building. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the massive surgical lights swayed wildly. The surgeon's hand jerked, and the scalpel clattered onto the floor. What's happening? An earthquake! A nurse shrieked in terror. And no. Look at the door! Another voice trembled. The heavy, steel-reinforced security door, requiring biometric and passcode access, was buckling inward like crushed aluminum foil. Spiderweb cracks shot through the concrete walls surrounding the frame. Before anyone could react, a second explosion hit. Crash! The steel door was violently blown off its hinges by an unstoppable force, flying over my head and embedding itself half a meter deep into the opposite wall. Through the thick smoke and dust, several massive figures, built like tanks, stepped through the breached entrance. They weren't NYPD. They weren't SWAT. They wore pitch-black, unmarked tactical combat gear, equipped with night vision goggles and gas masks. In their hands were suppressed assault rifles gleaming with a matte metallic finish. The oppressive, bloody aura radiating from them screamed that they were apex predators, lethal killing machines forged in the darkest war zones on Earth. The medical staff froze in absolute terror, their faces drained of blood, trembling violently. The leader pulled off his gas mask, revealing a harsh, chiseled face with a jagged scar across his left eyebrow. His name was Garrett Ghost Thorne. He was my father's head of security and the supreme commander of the Vance family's elite quick response tactical team. Ghost's eagle-like eyes swept the room and locked onto me, strapped to the table. When he saw the exposed skin on my lower back and the dropped scalpel, a terrifying, murderous rage ignited in his eyes. He didn't say a single word. He didn't have to. With just a glance, two operatives moved. One flashed forward with blinding speed, delivering a precise, brutal karate chop to the back of the anesthesiologist's neck. The man crumpled instantly. The second operative stalked toward the lead surgeon, who was now collapsed on the floor in a puddle of his own urine, sobbing incoherently. You were going to touch the heiress with this hand? The operative's voice was modulated through a digital scrambler, rendering it entirely devoid of human emotion. Without waiting for a response, the operative stepped heavily onto the surgeon's right wrist. Then, slowly, agonizingly, he applied pressure. Crack, crunch, the sickening sound of bones pulverizing filled the room, accompanied by the surgeon's pig-like squeals. His fingers were flattened into grotesque, impossible angles. That hand would never hold a scalpel again. Ghost walked over to me, using a tactical combat knife to swiftly slice through my leather restraints. He took off his thick tactical jacket, still warm with his body heat, and draped it over my shoulders to cover my exposed skin. Miss Vance, we were late. I await your punishment. He dropped to one knee, bowing the head that struck fear into the hearts of global warlords. I pushed myself up slowly. The anesthesia was still making my head spin, but I forced myself to stay lucid. I looked at the apocalyptic scene around me, looking at the sobbing, terrified medical staff. I felt absolutely nothing. Where is Julian? My voice was raspy from the drugs, but it was as cold as a glacier. Miss Vance. Intel confirms he left the facility an hour ago. He is currently at the Waldorf Astoria, attending his billion-dollar pre-IPO gala. Ghost replied respectfully. Billion-dollar gala. I repeated those words softly, a bloodthirsty smirk pulling at the corners of my mouth. He thought he had planned everything perfectly. He thought he was about to touch the sky. He had no idea the throne he built was about to become his guillotine. Ghost. I called his name. Yes, ma'am. Burn this place to the ground. Tell the press a gas leak caused an explosion. I paused, then added Julian's exact words. Make it look clean. A gleam of predatory excitement flashed in Ghost's eyes, the instinct of a hunter smelling blood. But he hesitated. Miss Vance, what about you? I grabbed his forearm and stood up on my own feet. The freezing night air blew through the breached wall, snapping my jacket and clearing the last of the fog from my brain. Killing him is too easy. I looked back at the operating table one last time, my eyes filled with boundless, chilling madness. I want him standing at the very top, watching everything he's ever been proud of turn to ash in my hands. I want him crawling like a dog at my feet in front of the entire New York elite, begging for mercy. Tonight is his billion-dollar gala. I laughed until a tear finally fell. No, tonight is my hunting season. The presidential suite. The top floor of the Waldorf Astoria. This was technically my property, or rather, one of the countless real estate assets the Vance family owned in the city. I hadn't stepped foot in here for 3 years because Julian always said he hated places like this. He called it tacky and soulless. Looking back, he was just insecure. He was terrified that this level of absolute, unfathomable wealth would strip away his fragile ego and expose his self-made tech genius persona as the pathetic joke it was. I was soaking in the massive jacuzzi, the steaming water washing away the residual smell of the clinic. Built into the bathroom wall was a massive smart mirror display, currently streaming a live feed of my dear husband. Julian was standing outside the burning, collapsed ruins of the Black Market Clinic in Queens. His face was purple with rage as he screamed into his phone at his subordinates. Useless. You're all useless. I told you to keep an eye on her. A fire? A fucking gas leak out of nowhere? Where is the body? I need a body. If you don't find Charlotte, you're all dead. He slammed the phone down and kicked a charred piece of debris, wincing in pain but unable to vent his panic. I took a sip of Pinot Noir from a floating crystal glass. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried his organ supply was gone. More importantly, he was terrified that without my corpse, the massive life insurance payout couldn't be claimed, and he wouldn't be able to cover the massive financial black hole in Apex Technologies before the IPO. It was laughable. The billions he spent years scheming to get could have been his with a single word from me, but he chose the stupidest, most unforgivable path. Miss Vance. Ghost's voice came from the other side of the frosted glass door. Julian has just released a public statement to the press. He claims you suffered a severe mental breakdown and that he has sent you to a highly secure, private psychiatric facility in Switzerland for closed-door treatment. He's bought off major media outlets and intends to announce it formally at the gala tonight. My smirk deepened. A mental breakdown. What a perfect excuse. That way, even if I magically appeared and told the truth, no one would believe the ramblings of a crazy woman. He could easily step in as my legal guardian and seize all my assets. Julian, you are far more vicious than I ever gave you credit for. Additionally, Ghost continued, Chloe Sterling has made a highly publicized appearance at the gala's red carpet. The jewelry she's wearing, it's the Ocean's Heart sapphire set Julian supposedly bought for your birthday last month. My hand paused. The Ocean's Heart was a gift from my mother for my 18th birthday. I had lied to Julian, telling him it was a cheap cubic zirconia replica I bought with my waitressing tips. He had actually mocked me for being vain. Now, He had draped it around another woman's neck. "Got it," I said flatly, draining the wine. I stepped out of the tub and wrapped myself in a plush white towel. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Pale, yes, but her eyes were blindingly bright, burning like hellfire in the dark. The softness was gone. Only vengeance remained. I walked into the suite's living room. Ghost had prepared everything. My private medical team was on standby to ensure my vitals were perfect within the next 3 hours. My elite styling team, flown in from Paris, was ready. A rack of haute couture dresses lined the wall. My eyes bypassed them all and landed on the garment bag at the very end. It was the dress my mother, Eleanor, had explicitly prepared for my battle tonight. "Julian, you thought you controlled the board. You thought you sent me to hell. You didn't realize I am the queen of hell. I was going to that gala. I would wear the color he feared most, wielding the absolute power he could never dream of touching, and I would turn his crowning moment into his graveyard. 5 hours until the gala. Julian was currently sitting in his CEO suite, enjoying the quiet before his triumph. He was probably ironing his bespoke Tom Ford suit or practicing his tear-jerking speech in the mirror. He thought he was steps away from the summit, completely oblivious to the fact that the foundation of his skyscraper was already crumbling. I lounged on the velvet sofa as the stylist worked on my hair, watching the real-time data feed on the holographic tablet in front of me. "Miss Vance, Phase 1 is complete." A heavily encrypted message popped up. It was from the Vance family's financial mastermind, my Uncle Harrison, the Wolf of Wall Street. I gave Ghost a slight nod. Ghost dialed a secure line. The audio feed piped straight into the room, Julian's unfolding nightmare. "What do you mean? What do you mean my 3 primary corporate accounts in Switzerland are frozen?" Julian's voice blasted through the speakers, hysterical and furious. I could picture the veins bulging on his forehead. "Who gave you the authority?" "I am a VIP client." On the other end, a calm, heavily accented Swiss banker replied with terrifying politeness. "I apologize, Mr. Crawford. We received orders from the absolute highest authority. Your corporation is under immediate investigation for massive international financial fraud and money laundering. Until the audit is complete, all assets are indefinitely frozen." "What authority? Name them!" Julian screamed. "I am sorry, sir. You do not have the clearance for that information," the banker said smoothly, and the line went dead. Dead silence in the CEO office. On the surveillance feed, Julian collapsed into his leather chair, violently tearing at his tie to breathe. A sheen of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His lifeline, the cash he needed to fake his company's solvency, was severed. And right before his IPO, he couldn't comprehend it. He thought his books were flawless. Who on earth possessed the power to command the Swiss banks to freeze an account on a whim? His pathetic imagination could never fathom the echelon of power I commanded. He would just chalk it up to incredibly bad luck. He would panic. He would sweat. But he wouldn't trace it back to me. The orphan he thought he had buried. That was exactly what I wanted. I was going to pluck his feathers one by one, sever every escape route, and force him to walk into his own execution completely paralyzed by dread. "Miss Charlotte, your hair is done, Tony," the lead stylist murmured. I looked in the mirror. Cascading, voluminous waves of hair were pinned back in a sharp, vintage style, exposing my long neck. My makeup was razor-sharp winged eyeliner that made me look like a leopard ready to strike. "Perfect," I smiled. "Bring me the dress." The second domino would be pushed by Chloe Sterling herself. Stupid, vain Chloe. My private assistant, an elite hacker known as Cypher, projected a screenshot onto the tablet. It was Chloe's latest Instagram post. She was standing in the Waldorf Astoria ballroom wearing a white diamond-encrusted gown, draped in my Ocean's Heart sapphires. The caption was just 3 words, reeking of arrogance: "The new queen." The comments were flooded with confused mutual acquaintances asking, "Wait, what about Charlotte? Where's Julian's wife?" Chloe actually replied to them, her fake sweetness practically dripping from the screen. Oh, Charlotte's mental health took a very dark turn. Julian had to send her to a private sanitarium in Europe. We are all praying for her recovery. Miss Vance, do you want me to wipe her account and scrub this off the internet? I can do it in 3 seconds. Cypher's voice crackled in my earpiece. No. I chuckled, taking a sip of my espresso. Let her have her fun. In fact, let's give the whole city a gift. Cypher, execute the payload. Target? The massive LED jumbotron right outside Apex Technologies in Times Square. Let New York see the real Mrs. Crawford. Copy that. Initiating broadcast, Cypher said. Giddy. At 5 p.m., the absolute peak of Manhattan rush hour, the massive curved jumbotron in Times Square, which had been playing Julian's slick IPO promotional video, suddenly went black. 3 seconds later, the screen lit up. But not with Julian's face. It was a slideshow of ultra-high definition, incredibly compromising photos and videos. Photos of Chloe before her massive plastic surgery. Photos of her in a seedy underground escort club in Vegas, sitting on the laps of overweight politicians. And then, the video's crystal-clear security footage of Chloe and Julian hooking up in hotel rooms, office desks, and parking garages. The audio was hacked into the surrounding billboard speakers. Chloe's moans and Julian's heavy breathing echoed across Times Square. Traffic literally stopped. Thousands of pedestrians froze, pulling out their iPhones, recording the spectacle. Holy shit, isn't that Julian Crawford? The tech guy going public tomorrow? Who's the girl? I thought his wife was in an asylum? Within 10 minutes, the hashtag number Julian Crawford sex tape was the #1 trending topic globally on X. Through the cameras, I watched Julian trashing his office like a caged animal, smashing his monitors. In her dressing room, Chloe was screaming hysterically at her phone. They were ruined. But this was only the appetizer. I stood up. The styling team unzipped the garment bag. A flash of blinding crimson hit the light. Julian was resourceful. I'll give him that. Within 30 minutes, he used every connection and millions of dollars to scrub the videos from the internet. The trending topics were nuked. He issued a rapid PR statement claiming the videos were malicious AI deepfakes created by corporate rivals to derail his IPO, and threatened massive lawsuits. A brilliant spin. But he was cornered. Miss Vance. He tracked your location, Cypher warned. He pulled the hotel's VIP logs. He's in the private elevator heading to your penthouse right now. He has about 12 guys with him, ex-MMA fighters from his corporate security team. Ghost appeared silently behind me like a phantom. Should we terminate them in the hallway, ma'am? I knew what terminate meant. Ghost's men could erase Julian and his thugs from the mortal plane in under 60 seconds. No. I shook my head. Let him in. Ghost, take everyone to the adjoining suite. Do not come out unless I give the word. But ma'am, I want to see the look on his face. I smiled, admiring my blood-red gown in the mirror. Bang! The heavy mahogany door to the penthouse was kicked open. Julian stormed in, flanked by 12 massive, suited thugs. He expected to find me cowering, hiding, terrified. Instead, he found me sitting elegantly on the velvet sofa, sipping a glass of whiskey. Charlotte, you fucking bitch! He roared, his eyes bloodshot, looking like a rabid dog. You leaked those videos, didn't you? I didn't answer. I just swirled the amber liquid in my glass. You kicked down my door just for that? I thought you were here to ask if your missing kidney donor turned up dead or alive. The words hit him like a physical blow. He froze, his eyes darting around the massive, luxurious suite. Finally, his gaze landed on a man's tactical jacket draped casually over an armchair ghost's jacket. A twisted, ugly sneer of realization spread across his face. He suddenly relaxed, his arrogant superiority returning. Oh, I get it now, he scoffed, looking at my stunning red dress with sheer disgust. I wondered how a pathetic little waitress had the guts to run and pull a stunt like this. You found yourself a sugar daddy, didn't you? Spreading your legs for some rich old man to back you up? He stepped closer, towering over me. You think some random Wall Street sugar daddy can save you from me? The people you're dealing with are so far beneath my level, they aren't even qualified to shine my shoes. He was so deeply, fatally wrong. It was intoxicating. I stood up slowly, stepping directly into his personal space. I was close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixed with the foul scent of his panic sweat. "Julian," I whispered, my voice dripping with honeyed poison. "Take a guess. Who do you think is more powerful? My sugar daddy? Or you?" He was taken aback by my sudden softness. In that split second of hesitation, I reached up and gently straightened his crooked tie. As my fingertip brushed the bare skin of his neck, a micro-needle concealed beneath my acrylic nail coated in a potent, fast-acting paralytic punctured his skin flawlessly. Julian stiffened. Instantly, a bizarre numbness shot down his spine. His limbs went completely slack, and he began to collapse. I caught him smoothly, easing him down onto the sofa so it looked entirely natural to his bodyguard standing by the door. What did you do to me?" He slurred, panic flooding his eyes as he realized he couldn't lift a single finger. "Nothing." I wiped my fingers meticulously with a wet wipe, as if I had touched garbage. "Just a mild paralytic. Enough to keep you quiet and force you to listen. You can't reason with a rabid dog, can you?" His eyes bulged with rage and humiliation. He tried to scream for his guards, but all that came out was a muffled, pathetic groan. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him, crossing my legs, looking down at him like a queen judging a peasant. "Tonight's gala is do or die for you, isn't it?" I said slowly. "Your Swiss accounts are frozen. Your only hope of saving Apex Tech is securing the investments from the billionaires attending tonight. But after that little sex tape scandal, your reputation is in the gutter. No smart investor will touch a CEO drowning in a PR nightmare." Despair flickered in his eyes. I had hit the nail on the head, but I leaned forward, dangling the bait. "There is a solution. If I, your legal wife, show up at the gala tonight, standing by your side in a stunning gown, and publicly declare that the videos were fake and our marriage is stronger than ever, the scandal disappears. Your investors will sign." His eyes lit up like a dying man seeing water. He tried to nod frantically. "Don't get too excited. I have one condition." I pulled a document from the coffee table. It looked exactly like the organ donation form he had shoved in my face hours ago. But the header read, "Irrevocable Equity Transfer Agreement. Sign over 50% of your shares in Apex Technologies to me. Sign it, and I'll play the perfect, loving wife tonight." I placed a pen in his trembling right hand, the only hand the paralytic hadn't fully frozen yet. "If you don't." I casually picked up a solid crystal ashtray and let it slip from my fingers, smashing it into dust on the marble floor. "I don't mind having my people show your 12 bodyguards how a CEO becomes a paraplegic." He stared at me, his eyes warring with fury, greed, and absolute terror. He knew I wasn't bluffing. The drug was wearing off just enough for him to move his hand. He gripped the pen. Suddenly, he looked up, and to my utter disgust, tears welled up in his eyes. "Charlie, I'm so sorry," he sobbed hoarsely, pulling out his Oscar-worthy acting skills. "It was Chloe. She seduced me. I lost my mind. I've only ever loved you. Please, give me one more chance." If this were 3 days ago, I might have fallen for his crocodile tears. Now, it just made me sick. I didn't say a word. I simply held up the microneedle, letting it glint in the light. His performance stopped instantly. He knew the gig was up. Defeated. Trembling. He scrawled his signature on the transfer agreement. "Good boy," I smiled, snatching the document. I echoed the very words he had said to me in the clinic. "Now, I'm going to give you a surprise you will never forget." Julian took his men and scurried out. As he left, his eyes shot venom at me. He genuinely believed this was a temporary setback. He thought that once the IPO was secured tonight, he would have the money and power to invalidate the contract and have me killed. His stupidity was almost endearing. He didn't realize he hadn't just signed over shares, he had signed his own death warrant. "Miss Vance, we are ready," Ghost appeared. I handed him the signed agreement. "Give this to Uncle Harrison. Tell him to start the slaughter." "Yes, ma'am." My Uncle Harrison, the butcher of Wall Street, had been lurking in the shadows with his elite quant team for 3 days. They were apex predators waiting for the blood in the water. With this 50% equity, combined with the ghost shares the Vance family had secretly acquired, we were going to launch a catastrophic, hostile short squeeze on Apex Tech the second the markets opened in Asia. But bankruptcy wasn't enough. I wanted him destroyed legally, socially, and permanently. I dialed a highly secure number. "Hello? Richard, it's Charlotte," I said, my tone shifting to polite respect. "Charlie!" Billionaire venture capitalist Richard Harrington boomed through the phone. He was my father's oldest ally, and ironically, the lead investor Julian was desperately trying to woo tonight. "Where have you been hiding for 3 years? Your parents have turned the world upside down looking for you." "It's a long story, Richard. I'll be home tonight." "Thank God." "But wait, why are you calling me from a burner?" "Richard, I know you're attending the Apex Tech Gala tonight." "Yeah," Richard sighed. "That Crawford kid has momentum, but I don't trust him. He's too arrogant, too desperate." "Richard," I cut to the chase, "what if I told you Julian Crawford isn't just a fraud, but a monster who tried to murder his wife for insurance money?" Dead silence on the line. When Richard Harrington finally spoke, his voice possessed the wrath of a titan. "Charlotte, tell me everything. Who is the wife he tried to murder?" "Me." I hung up the phone. The storm clouds had fully gathered. I looked in the mirror one last time. The crimson gown fit like a second skin. The ruby choker around my neck gleamed like fresh blood. "The car is ready, ma'am," Ghost said. "Let's go." I picked up the train of my dress and stepped out. It was time to attend the banquet my husband had so graciously prepared for me. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom was a scene straight out of The Great Gatsby. Crystal chandeliers, overflowing champagne towers, a live symphony orchestra flown in from Vienna. The room was packed with senators, Wall Street titans, and A-list celebrities. At the center of it all stood Julian. Dressed in a pristine white tuxedo, he looked the part of the triumphant tech visionary. He was working the room flawlessly, shaking hands, flashing his charming smile, accepting the endless praise. Beside him, Chloe Sterling sat in a designer wheelchair, draped in my mother's sapphires, playing the tragic but beautiful invalid to perfection. "Mr. Crawford, congratulations on the IPO. Apex is going to change the world. And Miss Sterling, you look radiant. You two are the ultimate power couple." They soaked in the adulation, entirely convinced they had won the game of life. I didn't enter through the main doors. I took the VIP biometric elevator up to the glass-enclosed mezzanine overlooking the ballroom. From here, I watched the rats scurry in the maze. Julian stepped up to the microphone. The orchestra quieted down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice was smooth, laced with perfectly calculated sorrow. "I am sorry to bring a dark cloud to such a joyous evening, but my fiancée, Chloe, suffers from terminal kidney failure. The doctors say she won't survive the winter without a transplant." Gasps of sympathy echoed through the crowd. Chloe dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Give the girl an Oscar. We actually found a perfect match," Julian continued, his voice cracking. "My legal wife, Charlotte." The crowd began to whisper, sensing the drama. But Julian shook his head in faux agony. Due to some irrational jealousy, she not only refused to save a dying woman's life, but she ran away. She even suffered a severe mental breakdown, fabricating those awful AI deepfake videos today just to ruin us. He bowed deeply. "If anyone has seen my wife, please tell her. I forgive her." I will give her half my company if she just comes back and saves Chloe. The crowd erupted into furious murmurs. My God, Julian is a saint. That Charlotte woman sounds like a psycho. Refusing to save a life out of spite? She should be locked up. He had successfully weaponized the entire New York elite against me. He was the martyr. I was the villain. He looked down at Chloe and gave her a smug, victorious wink. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo of the rundown trailer park in upstate New York, where I had pretended to grow up. Two thugs were standing outside my parents' rusty trailer, holding a jerry can of gasoline and a lighter. Below the photo was a text from Julian. I know you're in the building, Charlotte. You have 10 minutes to put on that cheap, ugly thrift store dress I bought you and walk down those stairs. Beg for my forgiveness in front of everyone, or I burn your white trash parents alive. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted me to stand next to the glittering Chloe looking like a filthy, uneducated peasant. He wanted to break my spine publicly. Ghost saw the text. The air dropped by 10 degrees. Miss Vance, I will deploy a strike team to upstate New York immediately. We will execute them. I closed my eyes, suppressing the volcanic rage. When I opened them, they were as cold as the void. No, I whispered. He didn't know that my poor parents were currently sunbathing on our private island in the Maldives. The only things waiting in that trailer were 3 retired, throat-ripping military K-9 Belgian Malinois trained by my father. Let's play, I said. I walked into the mezzanine closet. I stripped off the $1 million crimson gown and pulled on the faded, cheap, off-white cotton sundress Julian had bought me 3 years ago. I wiped off my makeup, letting my face look pale and sickly. I slipped off my heels and put on scuffed Converse sneakers. I looked like a battered, pathetic victim. Miss Vance, why? Ghost asked, horrified. Because. I smiled, a ghostly smile. I want him to experience what it feels like to fall from heaven straight into hell. 10 minutes were up. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. A single spotlight hit the entrance. I stood there, slouching, hands nervously wringing the hem of my cheap, washed-out dress, looking terrified like a deer in headlights. The absolute pinnacle of high society stopped and stared. The contrast between the gold leaf ballroom and my thrift store rags was jarring. The silence broke into a wave of suppressed, mocking laughter. Is that the crazy wife? She looks homeless. Did she wander in from the subway? Good Lord! No wonder Julian prefers Chloe. Julian stood on the stage, the ultimate victor. He smiled benevolently, opening his arms. Charlotte, you came back. Come here, darling. Let's get you the help you need. He thought I was surrendering to save my parents. He thought I had accepted my fate as dirt beneath his designer shoes. I began to walk toward the stage. Every step I took was heavy, surrounded by the sneers and whispers of billionaires. But as Julian reached out his hand to grab mine, a sound interrupted us. It started as a low rumble, vibrating the champagne flutes on the tables. Then it grew into an earth-shattering, deafening roar. Thwup, 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 thwup. What the hell is that? A senator yelled. Helicopters? Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, 3 pitch-black, heavily modified Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters hovered like angels of death. Their blinding searchlights pierced the glass, bathing the entire ballroom in a harsh, interrogative glare. This wasn't a police presence. This was military-grade air superiority. Julian's outstretched hand froze in midair. The smug smile on his face cracked, replaced by utter bewilderment. Before anyone could process the Black Hawks, the main doors of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown open with a violent crash. A column of 12 men marched in. But they weren't hotel security. They wore the crisp, terrifyingly sharp suits of the Secret Service and federal agents. Their earpieces coiled tightly, their eyes scanning the room like targeting lasers. They moved with absolute brutal efficiency, physically shoving billionaires and socialites out of the way to form a wide, clear path from the entrance directly to the stage. The room fell into a horrifying, deathly silence. The billionaires realized instantly that whoever was walking through those doors possessed a level of power that could wipe them off the map. Julian was trembling. He backed away from me, and in that dead silence, I stopped acting. I stood up perfectly straight. I grabbed the collar of the cheap, pathetic cotton dress and pulled. Rayip! The flimsy fabric tore away, pooling at my feet. Revealed underneath was the breathtaking, skin-tight crimson silk gown. I kicked off the Converse and stepped into a pair of black stiletto heels Ghost had slid across the floor. The crowd gasped in shock. The pathetic, homeless wife had transformed into a terrifying, radiant queen of vengeance. Julian's eyes practically popped out of his skull. "See, Charlotte? What are you?" A man in a sharp suit, the governor's chief of staff, walked briskly down the cleared aisle. He didn't look at Julian. He didn't look at the billionaires. He walked straight up to me, stopped, and bowed perfectly at a 90-degree angle. "Miss Vance." "The governor and Mr. Vance have arrived via the private elevator." Miss Vance. Those two words dropped like a nuclear bomb. The New York elite aren't stupid. They knew the name Vance. The invisible emperors of the East Coast. Julian's face drained of all blood. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on his soul. He staggered backward, crashing into the podium. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a terror so pure it bordered on madness. "Vance," he mouthed. Unable to make a sound, the private elevator pinged. Two figures emerged, flanked by heavily armed federal tactical teams. On the left was my father, Victor Vance. He wore a simple, immaculately tailored black suit, leaning slightly on a solid mahogany cane topped with a silver wolf. His aura was suffocating, the presence of a man who could start or end a war with a phone call. On the right was my mother, Governor Eleanor Vance, dressed in a sharp slate gray pantsuit. Her gaze was clinical, piercing, and terrifyingly authoritative. She represented the absolute, uncompromising power of the state. As they walked in, every single billionaire, senator, and CEO in the room realized what was happening. As if controlled by a hive mind, the entire ballroom stood up. Powerful men bowed their heads, socialites averted their eyes. No one dared to breathe. Julian was shaking so violently his teeth were audibly chattering. Clack, clack, clack. He looked at the governor of New York. He looked at the legendary shadow billionaire. And then he looked at me, the girl he had locked in an apartment and tried to harvest organs from. "Mom. Dad," Julian croaked, desperately trying to cling to the lie, falling to his knees. "Please, let me explain. It was Chloe. Chloe set me up." Victor Vance didn't even pause. He walked up to the kneeling Julian. His cold eyes looked down at him like one looks at a cockroach. "Who the hell are you calling Dad?" Before Julian could blink, Victor raised the heavy mahogany cane and swung it down with the force of a baseball bat. Crack! The sound of Julian's right kneecap shattering into powder echoed through the silent ballroom. "Arjaga!" Julian unleashed an animalistic scream of agony, collapsing onto the marble floor, clutching his mangled, unnaturally bent leg. Blood seeped through his white tuxedo pants. Several women in the crowd fainted. No one dared to move a muscle. Victor Vance planted the bloody tip of his cane right between Julian's eyes, pressing him into the floor. "You tried to butcher my daughter. Tell me, boy, how many lives do you think you have?" Eleanor Vance ignored the bleeding worm on the floor. She walked up to me, gently fixing a stray lock of my hair, her eyes melting with a mother's fierce love. "You've suffered enough, Charlie." Then she turned to the crowd, pulling a sealed envelope from her chief of staff. Her voice boomed with absolute authority. "Julian Crawford, Apex Technologies, is currently under federal investigation for massive securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and 27 counts of corporate espionage. Furthermore, you are officially indicted for attempted murder, kidnapping, insurance fraud, and medical malpractice." She nodded to the doors. FBI SWAT has authorization to execute the warrant. A dozen heavily armored FBI SWAT operators flooded the room. They yanked Julian off the floor by his broken leg, ignoring his shrieks of agony, and slammed handcuffs onto his wrists. Seeing Julian dragged away, Chloe Sterling lost her mind. She jumped out of her wheelchair, exposing her fake illness to everyone, and tried to run for the service exit. "Stop her!" a voice yelled. It was Dr. Pierce, the surgeon from the black market clinic. His hands were heavily bandaged, and he was being escorted by 2 federal agents. He pointed a shaking, cast-covered arm at Chloe. "That bitch planned it all. She's not sick. She bribed me to fake the dialysis reports so they could harvest Miss Vance's kidney and murder her for the insurance money. I have the audio recordings." Chloe froze. The blood vanished from her face. She looked around at the billionaires who had praised her minutes ago, now staring at her with utter disgust. 2 female agents grabbed her wrists, slapping the cuffs on. Chloe let out a piercing, hysterical shriek. Her legs gave out, and a dark puddle of urine spread across the floor beneath her designer gown. She passed out cold and was dragged out by her armpits like a sack of garbage. The billion-dollar gala had become a slaughterhouse. My parents turned to me. "Let's go home, Charlie." I looked at the terrified crowd, at the wreckage of Julian's empire. I smiled softly. The game is over. I didn't go back to their penthouse. I went to the Waldorf presidential suite. I took off the cheap cubic zirconia wedding ring I had worn for 3 years and tossed it into the roaring fireplace. I watched the metal turn red hot, melt, and vanish into the ashes. A month passed. Julian and Chloe were sitting in a maximum security federal holding facility, awaiting a trial that would undoubtedly end in life sentences. Uncle Harrison had successfully shorted Apex Tech into oblivion. The company was delisted, bankrupt, and dissolved. I was back at the Vance estate in the Hudson Valley, heavily guarded and secluded. I was slowly taking over my father's empire, learning to wield the power I had run away from, until one afternoon, Julian's mother, Barbara Crawford, showed up at the estate gates. She knelt in the snow for 24 hours, begging to see me. I finally let her into the sunroom. She looked 20 years older, her clothes filthy, weeping hysterically on the floor. "Charlotte, please, show mercy." Julian was just confused. He was seduced by that whore, Chloe. He truly loved you, I swear it. Please don't let him die in prison. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, sipping Earl Grey tea. "He loved me?" I asked coldly. "Barbara, do you know who the surgeon was that Julian hired to harvest my kidney?" She shook her head, confused. "It was Dr. Alan Pierce," I said, leaning forward. "The exact same surgeon who performed your miraculous kidney transplant 20 years ago." Barbara stopped breathing. Her eyes widened in sheer, paralyzing terror. "You had a rare blood type. You couldn't find a donor," I whispered, my voice slicing through her soul. "So Julian, just a young man back then, paid off Dr. Pierce to forge a matching registry. He bought a kidney from a desperate, starving college student on the black market to save your life. Julian used that secret to blackmail Pierce into operating on me." Barbara collapsed entirely, her body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "So tell me, Barbara," I stood up, looking down at her, "is your son just confused? Or is he a born monster, nurtured by the blood of innocence to keep you alive?" I turned my back on her. "Ghost. Throw her out, and mail the evidence of the illegal organ harvest to the FBI, and to the family of that college student." Behind me, Barbara let out a wail of absolute, soul-crushing despair. I felt no pity. Julian was sentenced to life without parole in a supermax prison. Chloe got 15 years, and on the morning of the verdict, Barbara Crawford jumped from the roof of the hospital where she had received her stolen kidney 20 years ago. I sat in my greenhouse. The white roses I used to love had withered and died. I took a pair of shears and cut them down to the roots. Instead, I walked over to a rare, impossibly expensive black peony my father had imported. Its petals were as dark as the abyss, with a center of violent, bloody crimson. It was thriving in the cold. I reached out and gently touched the velvet petals. From now on, there were no more white roses in my life, only the black peony, blooming fiercely in the ruins.